in the next quarter, you need to write a retraction to tell your audience that you misled them, because that's what they did.
Greetings to the brightest audience in the country. Welcome to Real Science Radio. I'm Fred Williams.
And I'm Doug McBurney. Fred, it is great to be back with you on Real Science Radio. And this week, we're joined by our good friend, pastor, Bible teacher, author, and hydroplate expert, Pastor Kevin Lea. Welcome to Real Science Radio.
Great to be with you guys again.
Well,
Yes.
Kevin, it's great to have you back. You know, we slated you to come on and talk about some of these so-called interstellar objects, such as this recent 3 Atlas comet that they discovered back in July. And we want to get to that, but instead, there's a soon-to-be-released article that we have access to before it's actually released of the Creation Research Society Quarterly. And it's another Edward Isaac's hit piece on the hydroplate theory. I want to make sure we get to that too.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like both those subjects will be interesting to your audience.
You've got to help us unpack some of the claims that the hydroplate theory fails, and I believe that's from the paper. I can't remember if it actually says the word fails, because, well, let's just jump right into the main point. The hydroplate theory. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, so this so it's titled "The Petrological Problem with Hydroplate Theory's Astronomical Submodel," which is a mouthful, but basically he's arguing that because the hydroplate theory says asteroids came from Earth during the flood, they should be made of granite, not olivine, right? I mean, there's several assumptions in this article, and Kevin, what a perfect timing for you to be coming on the show, because you are, I think, one of the foremost experts now in the hydroplate theory. And I'd love to get your take on this article. I had a lot of problems with it, and I know I'm biased, but to me, right away, there was major issues I saw with this article, and it was, in a way, it was kind of, it upset me in a way it probably shouldn't, but I want you to dive into this, because, again, there's assumptions built in, and I think you're going to be the best to elucidate what those are.
Well, and maybe we could start by asking the question that the paper seems to imply. Does the hydroplate theory insist that asteroids, comets, and TNOs are made of granite?
No, never has.
Okay, well.
But that's what they assert. And you were right, Doug, when you said this is the final sentence of this article. The hydroplate theory astronomical submodel simply fails to explain the petrological data, which calls into question the HPT system as a whole. Isaacs, 2023. And so the hydroplate theory never says that all the debris that was jettisoned when the fountains of the Great Deep burst up in one day and the crack widened from that rupture of one day and sent debris into space. Nowhere has it ever said that it's all granite. And in fact, Walt Brown and the advocates of the hydroplate theory know that there's going to be mantle material that would have also been weakened as a result of the supercritical water dissolving the subterranean floor. And that mantle material, along with building up itself up and starting the ridge and the water escaping to the crack, would have eroded the mantle material. There would have been a lot of mantle material jettisoned into space. So it's going to be mantle and granite. And like we said even before the show, we don't even know that the hydroplate theory makes an assumption that the granite that we're standing on of the crustal material is that way all the way down to the bottom, to the subterranean floor, but we don't know that.
Whoa. No. Stop right there. Stop the presses. Are you saying that hydroplate advocates are willing to say publicly that we don't know everything?
Yeah, we don't know anything. There has to be assumptions, and then when you look at the data that that comes to us from space.
You gotta be kidding me.
What's the data saying? The data, all the data from space screams that comets, asteroids, trans-Neptunian objects, what they call SSBSs in this article,
SSSBs.
SSSBs.
See, there's too many letters. That's not going to work.
Yeah,
I'm going to stick with cat nose. I
like
like that one
cats.
better.
Comets, asteroids, trans-Neptunian objects. I like
Yeah.
cats. That
It rolls off the tongue easier than trying to keep track of which S and B comes before which S and B. That's just silly.
all the data screams that, and in fact, I said this to Dr. Brownlee of the University of Washington, not a hydroplate theory advocate, not a creationist. I told him in a conversation, this has been, I'm repeating this from other presentations we've had with you guys, but that Dr. Brownlee, everything that we're learning about space, from your Stardust probe, etc., can be explained by the Earth jettisoning material into space that became comets, asteroids, and TNOs. And he didn't dispute that. He didn't hang up on me. he didn't. I'm not going to say he's going to say that's where it came from. He can't do that. But he didn't think I was an idiot for saying that, because the answer, the result is yes, our evidence is that that's true, including amino acids, all the amino acids necessary for life, all the nucleotides necessary for life, that they're floating rock piles, that they're rounded up boulders, that they have crystalline minerals, and clays and other things that can only form in the presence of liquid water. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
Of hard science that would be explained most easily by the Earth jettisoned material at some time in the past that coalesced into comets, asteroids, and TNOs.
Let's get back to the article and the first assumption they make about how the hydroplate theory says that granite had to have been shot into space, and it also makes assumptions about the floor of the crust, right? Basalt floor. Kevin, are there issues with that?
Yeah, I mean, the author of this article, which we know nothing about, he's Edward A. Isaacs. We don't know his degrees. We don't know anything about him, which is kind of strange.
Well, and being somewhat familiar with the creation science literature going back ever since I've known Bob Enyart, going back 20 years, this guy seems to have come out of nowhere, Edward A. Isaacs, and he gets published time after time after time now. It just seems a little weird, that's all.
Yeah. And he gets published with HTP hydroplate theory hit pieces, and when you read it, you go, this guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. And this article is that in spades, because there was the 8th edition when it was printed. It has one picture of the fact that there's the crust, and then there's the subterranean chamber, and then there's magma, and then there's basalt. There's basalt, and then there's mantle. Walt really regretted that got published with that. There's a reason why he thought that. It was mostly because of what was happening in the Pacific Ocean. But he said, no, the subterranean chamber floor was mantle. It's been that way since 2008. And so this Edward Isaacs guy, he sits there and says, well, Walt says that it was basalt, and basalt doesn't make olivine, and there's olivine in space, so that makes the hydroplate theory fail on its face. And yet Walt hasn't said that since 2008. He says that the subterranean chamber floor was mantle. And that the mantle was dissolved by the supercritical water, just like the sealing of the granite crust, and that it doesn't say. I'm trying to think. It says that mantle and granite crust would have been jettisoned into space when the fountains of the Great Deep burst up, and so the whole premise is by him quoting 2008 information, and yet he knows that since 2008, Walt also increased the guess, based on science, the guess that the crust was more like 60 miles thick. So he recognizes that the crust thickness. So he's gotten an updated source of the hydroplate theory in one aspect, but he sticks with the 2008 stuff to make his hit piece, which is
And what I
incompetent.
don't like too is he references the 2019 hydroplate reference.
Right.
2019, right? That's
And there
totally
is no such thing. There is no such thing.
so I'm not
The
sure.
ninth edition, that was, as soon as Walt published the eighth edition, then the website became the ninth edition. Immediately after publishing the eighth edition, the website had the mantle was the subterranean floor, not
I
the
see.
salt.
Okay,
And
so well, and I don't mean to interrupt, but it seems that Dr. Baumgartner did update Mr. Isaacs about the crustal thickness, but maybe failed to update him about the nature of the floor of the subterranean chamber.
right. And we're guessing that John Baumgartner is the source behind Isaac's education, which would explain why, because Baumgartner does this all the time. At one point, Walt had the thickness of the crust at 10 miles. And even recently, he wants the big deal that Walt said it was 10 miles. That's impossible. No, John, he updated his theory. And it was based on scientific reasons. At first, it was 10 miles for Walt because that was the amount of crustal material that would erode to create the mile-thick sediments on the continents, which Baumgartner and CPT can't explain. And then when he realized all the evidence from space was showing that the comets and asteroids and TNOs were likely to have been jettisoned from the Earth, he increased the amount of crustal thickness that would have help account for the amount of mass that's out there. But it's not all, he doesn't say it's all crust. He knows, Walt knew, and by the way, the audience should know that Walt passed recently, and the memorial service for him is at the end of November. Which I'll be going to in Phoenix. And so Walt knew, advocates have known for over a decade, 15 years, 17 years. And yet he wants to make a hit piece based on obsolete information. Like I told you guys, to me, it's like Chevy big dealing that you don't buy a Ford in 2025. Don't buy a Ford because you know what Ford does? You have to get out of the car and go in the front, stick a hand crank onto the crankshaft and turn it over to get it to start. And how ridiculous is that when we can start the car by turning a key or pushing a button? That's what Isaacs has done. Which to me is incompetence, if not bordering on deliberate deception.
Deception and double deception.
Oh, well, that's those are strong words, but I feel almost compelled now, and I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, Fred, but there has been an email exchange between HPT supporters and Dr. Baumgartner himself. And so I've got a couple things that I want to spring on the world right now. So I have a theory. So everyone wonders about Edward A. Isaacs. He's a bit of a mystery man. And you might wonder, what does the A stand for in Edward A. Isaacs? And I have a theory that the A in Edward A. Isaacs stands for John R. Baumgartner. That's what I think that A stands for.
All right.
And Dr. Baumgartner, by the way, and I can back this up with copies of emails from Dr. Baumgartner. He has disparaged hydroplate theory in general. He's called it a gigantic scam. He accused Walt Brown of deception. He calls the HPT theory utterly bogus, which is the kindest, most uncontroversial thing he said. He dismissed the accurate predictions as meaningless and worthless in writing. He compared HPT supporters to flat earth advocates. He accused HPT supporters of allowing the devil to mess with our minds. He accused us of wild storytelling. I believe he accused Walt Brown personally of wild storytelling. Called the hydroplate theory absurd. Accused hydroplate advocates of executing a satanic assault against creation science. And then accused Walt Brown of being a false teacher, a deliberate deceiver who spun fables. This is in writing. This is John Baumgartner's words against Walt Brown personally, some HPT advocates personally, and HPT in general. And I've just got to say, having read the paper from Edward John R. Baumgartner Isaacs, I'm tempted to wonder if Mr. Isaacs is deliberately deceiving or deliberately spinning fables at this point.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to accuse, but it does make me
It
wonder.
appears that way.
Yeah.
And you know, we oftentimes say, well, tell me how you really feel about the hydroplate theory, Dr. Yeah,
Well-
how many more synonyms of vitriol does he have to make up?
And let me interject in here really quick too. So if you think about what's the foundation of the hydroplate theory, Walt Brown started with the Bible. There's plenty of biblical references. What does Baumgartner's CPT model start with? He said this. Bob Inyart wrote this down when he said it at a conference, that he wants to get plate tectonics into the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
He's not starting with the Bible. He's starting with a secular old earth idea. I will repeat that because there's some CPT advocates that say, oh, plate tectonics isn't an old earth idea. Yes, it is. I don't know how you can say it's not.
It is.
It's secular geology's way to get more millions of years into the Bible on these slow-moving plates, all based on highly interpretive, speculative data that you can get all kinds of answers depending on the answer you want based on the data. And I know this might be a little bit going too far, but I think they play fast and loose with flimsy data. And that's where it's hard for me to hear his criticisms and the things he says about Walt Brown when he himself starts with a secular old earth idea and then he builds it upon a model that has virtually no possibility of being accurate. And I do have experience with modeling. I was the modeling lead at Micron for 5 years. The stuff we modeled was vastly less complex than what he tried to model with a piece of software. And here's the thing with his model, and it was the way, it was how CPT got into the mainstream of creation. I know it for a fact because I went to all the conferences. It was always his presentation on his model. His model, if anything, it shows that it isn't true because in order to fix it, he has to invoke numerous miracles. His model would never see the light of day in any boardroom, in any design room across the entire world in engineering. And what is upsetting to me, and I've said this before on the show, we have too many geologists and geophysicists that are not listening to engineers, and in a lot of cases, in the case of this article, common sense. You can read the article and know right away they're making two major assumptions that rely again on flimsy data, all interpretive. And
Okay,
Kevin,
well, Fred, you know what? We need to bring this back because I don't want them to accuse us of playing fast and loose. What are the two major assumptions? And let's get to the olivine controversy because we need to address that directly. That is the main point of the paper.
yeah, so there's a second assumption, and Kevin, I'd like you to address that one, and that's the olivine in these SSSBs, or what do we call them? Cats?
Cat nose.
Cat nose. Okay.
Comets, asteroids, TNOs.
Yes.
That's what they're talking about, small body stuff. But the olivine was expected. Dr. Brown wrote a prediction of what would be found on the Stardust space probe, including olivine. I mean, Dr. Brown predicted olivine would be found. Olivine was found, and it surprised Dr. Brownlee of the University of Washington, not Dr. Brown. Dr. Brownlee, University of Washington. What surprised Dr. Brownlee even more was that they found glycine. And he and I talked on the phone as a result of finding glycine. He admitted to me he was shocked to find an amino acid glycine. Well, since then, they have found all amino acids necessary for life on Bennu and Ryugu. They have found all of the nucleotides for DNA and RNA on Ryugu and Bennu. They found bacteria on Ryugu, but they want to blame it on contamination of the clean room.
You've got to be kidding me.
Hydroplate theory advocates say, no, you can't blame it on the clean room because it's what you found on Ryugu. And it was a hibernated bacteria jettisoned into space. And they know that bacteria that is jettisoned, a bacteria can go into hibernation and be in space. And for hundreds of years, it doesn't matter that the environment's there, it can reculture inside the lab. And it cultured inside the lab. They got it into a condition where it had oxygen and other things, and they were able to culture it. And they want to blame the lab because if they don't blame the lab, they have to say somehow a bacteria identical to Earth was able to evolve on an asteroid that's millions of years old. So they cannot say that it came from Ryugu. So it has to be a clean room.
Now, Kevin,
Our prediction is hydroplate theory advocates is they will always have a bad clean room. No matter how many samples they go and get, they're all going to come back.
I was going to say that the evolutionary biology community is famous for spinning the wildest fables in the history of fables, but even that one, that's too much for them to pull off. They wouldn't even try that one despite their history of enormous fables.
So guys, help me out with this one though. Aren't there secular scientists that also say, well, no, that is life, and that's how life got seeded here. And the creationist community, again, I'm going to say articles against HPT in this case, they claim that there is contamination on the meteorites that we find that have bacteria. It has to be contamination, because there was a recent article in one of the creation journals on that very fact. In fact, our friend Dr. Royal Truman was was a co-author, but they actually find it now on Bennu, right, Kevin? They're actually finding that this isn't just on meteorites.
And see, in fact, when I gave the presentation in Nebraska, and this is at hydroplate.org, you can look at a presentation that I gave to a creation group in Nebraska, where I explain how they say that this is the building blocks of life. And there was a guy who had, for years and years, they were finding meteorites with amino acids, bacteria, stuff like this. And they were wanting to say, well, we just didn't get to that meteorite that landed on terra firma, terrestrial, and therefore the bacteria got in here, even though we're digging down deep inside of these things and opening it up and we see minerals that form in liquid water. And they're saying, well, how could this all happen? And now that they found it on Bennu and Ryugu, they're sitting there saying, and they won't do with the bacteria. They won't go bacteria because they can't go bacteria. But they are saying the building blocks of life, the nucleotides, the amino acids, they somehow formed out there in the near absolute zero vacuum of space on these asteroids, and that the asteroids that hit the Earth in the millions of years ago, they gave the building blocks of life. But they really can't go that, and that all evolved into this bacteria that is common on Earth. Mm-hmm. And so we went through that whole thing where you see this guy saying, now we know it wasn't contamination. We did find these amino acids. We did find these things on meteorites, and it wasn't because it got contaminated by landing on Earth.
Yeah, and so the seculars have their story that they tell. The creation scientists have, we all make assumptions, and we're all a bit of spinners of stories and trying to explain things. But when it comes down to what does the scientific evidence we have, what does it indicate? Not going to say we know, but here's what caught my attention about the article is that it points out olivine as the Achilles heel of the hydroplate theory. And when you go and do a word search through the 9th edition, which you can do, olivine is prominently mentioned throughout the book, and it's not mentioned as if it's not to be, as if it's not expected to be found. And so Walt Brown didn't avoid the topic of olivine in the book.
No.
And so
he
the presence
predicted it would be found. He
Yes.
predicted that
Kevin, before we do that, let me read the direct quote from the article, and then we'll deal with this, because this is the other big assumption Isaacs makes. So here's the quote. It is believed that the vast majority of SSSBs are composed dominantly of olivine. And then he cites several articles, has several references. That SSSBs are composed dominantly of olivine. And so I want to get to that one.
Okay. Yeah.
And before you go on, Fred, I have to quote from the abstract. It says that SSSBs are predominantly olivine in composition.
Yep.
It says they are.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how you say that. I mean, how much stuff do we have, Dr. Lee? I know, or Kevin, I know you've studied. Do we have enough stuff to say that we know what cat nose are made of?
Well, let's eliminate meteorites because they're iron nickel for, they're heavy meteorites. And we talked before the show about why they're kind of lone rangers in the asteroid aspects of becoming meteorites ultimately. But of all the samples that we brought back from Viltu, Itakawa, Ryugu, and Bennu, we have in possession on Earth from these cat nose 4.5 ounces. Ounces of material. We have, spacecraft have used light spectrometry to find out what's in the comet tail, what's in the surface of an asteroid and stuff, and they do see olivine. Not surprising, they see olivine, but you don't know predominantly what something is made out of when you have 5 ounces in your hands and you only have spectrometry of what's on the surface. There's going to be, our prediction, hydroplate theory prediction would be, when you get down into the center of the asteroid, you're going to find bigger boulders up to 200 meters. And there's a reason for that I won't get into. And that was the seed rock that caused all the debris that was jettisoned from the Earth to come. And what's going to be on the surface is the last pulverized dust that would be landing on the surface. And that's exactly what you find.
So that makes sense with gravity, that there's a big rock that eventually attracts smaller rocks and then dust. And so what you're going to have on the surface is powder. And that's what we're seeing primarily. We haven't really gone down deep to find out what's it. So by the way, 5 ounces, that's like a half a cup of flour. That's not a lot.
Yeah. And secularists and hydroplate theory advocates would say that there's billions of tons of cat nose out there, and we're going to and so these guys have the, I mean, how could a professional scientist make a bold statement like that without any evidence to support the statement?
Seems rather unprofessional.
Without any research. And we've talked about AI before, and I use AI, and I know that it has issues, but there's a lot you can get using it. And when I saw that claim, both claims, both assumptions, we're dealing with assumption number 2 on the olivine. Here's what AI said. So I put in his quote, and it says that that's an oversimplification, and it says the composition of SSSBs is diverse. And then it has a list here of what they think something might be made of. For example, C-type asteroids might be 75% actually what it says is 75% of it is hydrated silicates, carbon, and clay, not olivine dominant.
What?
S-type asteroids, 17% silicate rock, some olivine and pyroxene. M-type asteroids, 8% metallic iron, nickel, etc. It says, so while olivine is common, it's not predominant in these SSSBs. Yet he claims it's predominant. It's really the science here is how this got how did this get through peer review, guys? I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go, Fred. Just come right out and say it.
Just do it!
Hey, one of the best things at helping me in my life and my career to come to the knowledge of the truth is when someone has smacked me in the face with myself embarrassing myself in public, which I think Edward Isaacs here. I mean, this is embarrassing. He should be embarrassed.
He should be.
Absolutely.
And John Baumgartner along with him. The A.
That's what I meant. Edward John R. Baumgartner Isaacs. Yes, it's embarrassing.
Extremely embarrassing, and it's even worse than that, because the reason we found out about this article, because it's being printed right now, it hasn't been published right now, is because some of us advocates that are on the board of the Hydroplate Theory, we received an email from him that was actually kind of surprising to me. It was from Tim Clary, who is the editor of the Creation Research Society Quarterly, works for ICR as their lead researcher. A person I've talked to personally about the hydroplate theory, and he just doesn't get it. I mean, he doesn't have to get the hydroplate theory, but he should be honest about what he's been told. I lectured him and the other scientists at ICR about what would be found on the DART mission, about how all the reasons why the hydroplate theory is supported by all the evidence from space. And all the predictions that have come true as a result. He was in the audience and heard this. And he decides to send us an email that surprised me, saying, hey, everybody, and there was a bunch of other people, a bunch of CPT advocates on there too. Hey, everybody, here's this article that's going to be coming out. Please give me comments. And so we had a advocate board meeting and talking about the same problems that we're all coming up with here. I mean, this is a seriously flawed article, and we need to let Tim Clary know. So we're going to put together a little thing. So Tim Clary, how much time do we have? And within 30 hours, we are contacting him saying, this is a flawed article that you're not going to want to publish the way it is. And so how long do we have to get you the formal comments? And he goes, oh, it's already to print.
Well, wait a second. I thought the whole point of sending the article to HPT advocates was to vet the article for problems, so that maybe if there was something you could pull it and edit. And no, wasn't the point.
Not unless I mean, Tim Clary must have been thinking, well, I'll send this email today, right now, and everybody in the HPT should be able to read it and respond within 5 minutes. And if they don't, we're going to print. I mean, that's really the way it came across. I mean, it was really 30 hours, but how can he even be thinking that somebody can, everybody can read it and carefully read it and discern it with everything else that they're doing in life and come back in 30 hours, and they can't get the publisher, the editor, the person responsible for Creation Research Society Quarterly with a bunch of doctorates in there and act so unprofessional with a document. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. So I would have thought that the whole point was a vetting of the article, but it doesn't seem like that was the point. So we don't know what the point was. The point was, I don't know, maybe to give us material for Real Science Radio. Maybe we have some fans, some secret fans there.
Yeah. Maybe the average Christian out there will recognize that, wow, it seems like Dr. Baumgartner calling other Christians all these nasty names and we're Satanists and stuff. Maybe he's not the person I should be listening to about how the flood occurred. And maybe organizations that all they do is put hit pieces out on hydroplate theory without ever getting advocates of the hydroplate theory to make sure they're accurate. And even when they do send one asking for comments, they didn't really want the comments. Maybe they just wanted to be able to say, well, we sent it to them. And we didn't hear back from them in 15 minutes. Wow. And so then we told them, and if that's what they do with this, then this is more egregious than we can even contemplate here. You know, we're thinking now that it's going to be published what should happen, and I think we should write a letter. This is my view. You guys knew or should have known that this was a completely incompetent, unresearched hit piece for no other reason but to just put another feather in your cap. We did HPT today, and you need to write a retraction. In the next quarter, you need to write a retraction to tell your audience that you misled them, because that's what they did.
Oh, I'm all for that. I would, if when I've been shown to be in error, I retract publicly. I think that's the honorable thing to do, and it's not unreasonable to call for that. With this, it's just such an egregious example of, well, I'm willing to call it scientific incompetence, malfeasance. I'm not a scientist. I'm a radio talk show host. I can say what I want to say. I am a student of the Bible, and I do understand how Christian brothers are supposed to treat each other. And I do know that John Baumgartner is a Christian brother. I have grilled him on his biblical understanding of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I know he understands it and believes it. And I think he is capable of better than this. That's all.
Yeah, we all should be capable, and the difference is that King David was capable of not lusting after and then having adultery with Bathsheba. When he did so, what did he do? He wrote Psalm 51 and cried out to God and said, "God, forgive me." And there needs to be a true Christian should repent when they know they're doing things that are false. They're misrepresenting the opponent's theories for the sake of trying to prop up your own, which is not even biblical, which a Christian should actually repent of doing something that's unbiblical. And how can this hit piece say hydroplate theory fails when, okay, go ahead and explain. Only hydroplate theory can explain contact binary asteroids. Only hydroplate theory can explain why there's millions of rounded off boulders on Comet 67P. Only hydroplate theory can explain all the amino acids, the nucleotides, the extreme TNOs, the extreme distant TNOs like Sedna, which is 83 astronomical units away from the Earth. And even the secular people realize that all 12 of the extreme TNOs have an orbital parameter of the argument of the perihelion that indicate that it had to have gotten a gravity boost from something within the elliptic plane of the solar system. And only hydroplate theory explains that. It got a gravity boost from Neptune. And they can't say Neptune did it, because that would mean that TNOs came from within inside the solar system, which they did, according to hydroplate theory.
Yep.
And so they have to think that there's a planet X out there, and we're going to find it in 3 years. Well, that was about 7 years ago. And they never will find it, because it was Neptune that gave those extreme TNOs their orbit. I mean, there is so much scientific evidence to support that the hydroplate theory explains everything. Jupiter family, the Trojans in front of and behind, everything.
Yeah, the floating rock piles. We didn't mention the floating rock piles. We didn't mention Bennu. Guess what they found on Bennu? Serpentinite. And where do you find serpentinite on Earth?
Off of the mantle in the mid-oceanic ridge, we see the mantle.
Yeah.
So here, this hit piece is all about minerals. This is an extremely intelligent person about mineral formation, and they found a mineral from the Middle Atlantic ridge that is found on Bennu.
Now, a fair article might mention that, oh, by the way, there is the evidence of the serpentinite, but we're going to focus on the olivine, but the article doesn't say anything like that. And just, I want to remind the audience that I do have Dr. Baumgartner in writing saying that the predictions, some of which you just mentioned, not all, are, quote, meaningless, quote, worthless. And if our object is to use science to show unbelievers that there's credible scientific evidence for the creation and for the global flood, that all of the evidence in favor of that, none of it is meaningless. None of it is worthless. And Dr. Baumgartner, we welcome any evidence you can offer to the argument because we want to help unbelievers realize that they've been deceived. We want to point them toward the Creator, and we'll accept any good evidence from you, any good evidence from CRSQ, any evidence from Edward Isaacs. We want all the evidence on the table. Wouldn't you agree with that, Dr. Baumgartner? Oh, I'm sorry. Wouldn't you agree with that, Kevin?
Well, I hope Dr. Baumgartner realizes that that is a good question for him and he answers it for you someday because he should accept the evidence. And in fact, he went even further. Because Brian Lauer asked him in an email, Dr. Baumgartner, what are the predictions that CPT makes? None. He has none. He admits he has no predictions. What biblical support do you have for CPT? He mentions no biblical support for CPT. I don't have to give that to you. And in that same response, he's saying, and I don't care about your predictions. They're meaningless because I know hydroplate theory is a fraud. You can, in other words, think about how unreasonable that is. I don't care about the evidence. Don't bother me with the facts.
Mm-hmm.
I have my theory, and it is the one that God ordained, and I'm the ordained spokesman from God for this theory, and don't mess with it. That's his attitude.
Wow.
And here, look at the abstract. Starts out the abstract of this Isaacs/Baumgartner article. The origin of small solar system bodies, SSSBs, such as asteroids, trans-Neptunian objects, comets, and meteorites, remains an elusive question in secular and creation cosmologies. Not true. Even that's a false statement. It's not an elusive question for hydroplate theory. There is not a single bit of evidence that's come from space about any of these objects that is a failure for hydroplate theory, except the one they make up in this article, which is based on fraud, based on false statements, I should say.
Yes, well, I mean, we could give them the benefit of the doubt and just assume that they're just going off pre-2008 information, which, I mean, that's only 15 years ago. How long ago is that?
Well, I want to get to that. So let's say that we were advocating the 2008 position. First of all, we don't know what the Earth is like beneath the surface. One of the things I never liked about CPT and a lot of the geologists and geophysicists, is you make a lot of assumptions that you kind of promote as fact when we really don't know. We can drill 5 or so miles beneath the Earth's surface, and we find what we didn't expect that the seismic imaging told us would be there wasn't there.
Yeah.
So we're always making assumptions with what's underneath the globe, and then we sell it as, okay, this is what's happening, this is true. We got to get away from that. We got to make sure people understand what the assumptions are. And this article, of course, was loaded with assumptions and that were sold as facts. And I just have a big problem with that. As you guys know, I've been with the whole modeling stuff. And I just hope we can, try to get people to think critically when they come across hit pieces like this. And this is what it was. It was a hit piece. I thought, Kevin, that the email that I was on that chain, I thought it was like, I didn't think there was anything disingenuous from Tim Cleary. I think he really thought he had a feather in his cap. I really think he thought that. I could be wrong, and I could be misinterpreting why that email went out. That was my first impression. Oh, they think they got us. And you know what? If they did get us, great. If there's evidence against it, I want to know about it.
Yeah.
But I just didn't see that. In fact, I saw the opposite. I saw this was probably the worst hit piece of all the ones they put out. And it's like a leaf on a tree. They think they pulled a leaf off, and the whole tree's wrong.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And let's talk about that because I told another creation scientist, very well known, very solid engineering kind of guy, not an HPT advocate. Self-admittedly, he says he doesn't know that much about it and he wants to know more. And I told him, look, Jay, I am only wanting the truth. If the evidence came back that hydroplate theory is truly fatally flawed from the evidence that they're finding in space, I would abandon it. I have better things to do as a pastor than to propagate lies and falsehoods. But the problem is that we don't get evidence. And then somebody could say to me, and it would be true, well, what about the incoming interstellar comets and asteroids, which a prediction of hydroplate theory from Dr. Brown is there will never be an incoming interstellar comet or asteroid, meaning incoming into the solar system, meaning that they're born in some other place in the solar system and they go whizzing by, because all comets, asteroids, TNOs had their origination from the fountains of the great deep being burst up, and all the debris that went out with the water became comets and asteroids with an elliptical orbit around the sun, and not from interstellar.
Well, just now, wait, before you go on, I want everyone to understand the gravity of that prediction, because if you read some of the articles, we're going to talk about this Atlas asteroid. If you read some of the articles, secular science is already asserting that they've proven there are interstellar objects, right? So,
Right.
Dr. Brown said there will be zero, none, ever.
Ever.
You can't make a more bold prediction than zero, none, ever. That is the boldest predictions a scientific researcher can make, and Dr. Brown made that boldly.
Yep.
That's going to be a tough one, and you're admitting right here on the air. I want to get you on tape.
Yeah.
You're admitting that if the evidence comes in that proves that's wrong, you're willing to reconsider the whole thing.
Well, no, I would say not the whole thing.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yes and no. I mean, if it would be all it doesn't erase the fact that there's 3 interstellars right now. It doesn't erase all the evidence for what we see in our solar system. But I don't have to even consider it, because there's no proof that the 3 supposedly interstellar objects came from outside of the solar system. And this is what's so critical, because the solar system, we know there's orbiting bodies in our solar system that are 83 astronomical units away from the sun. The Sedna is an extreme TNO. It is orbiting the sun in our solar system 83 AU. Astronomical units away from the Earth.
Way out there.
Way out there. When they saw 3I Atlas, it was 6 AU away. So we discover this, and when they saw it, its trajectory is to just go whiz by the sun. It's not in an elliptical orbit, but it could have been, and any orbital physics engineer that's honest would admit this. If it was in an elliptical orbit, and while it's been out there, way out there, it was probably a long period comet, way out there, maybe coming in for the first time, and it went by another object in the Kuiper belt, which there's tens of thousands of Kuiper belt objects, trans-Neptunian objects, and if it had a collision or it got a gravity boost by something that it went by, it would explain the orbit. And what they're finding on 3I Atlas is a bunch of water, which freaks me out. Other worlds, millions of years in the early birth of the solar system, they had water too. Other other stars in the Milky Way galaxy, they have the ability to have life plants, because this thing comes from Earth, has water, has minerals common to water, common to Earth, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's not even an interstellar. It's being advertised that because if you're going to have an Oort cloud as the origin of comets and asteroids, there would be a huge percentage of comets that would be hyperbolic. They would be incoming hyperbolic, meaning they were outside of the solar system. And so because they get none, if they get one that got a gravity boost that looks like one, they're not going to tell everybody, well, you know, we're not saying we saw it come into the solar system, but we're going to say it's interstellar.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
Kevin, I want to apologize for the setup there because I kind of set you up with the question, but I just wanted to establish for the audience that no scientific theory fails based on one piece of seemingly contradictory or even patently contradictory evidence. That doesn't mean the whole theory fails. That means that it's quite possible that an assumption you've made is in error and needs correction.
Yep.
So,
and your prediction's in error. Because
yeah.
because as Christians, we can't say that God couldn't have created a body that, you know, was going to fly by and say, hi Earth, you know, as it goes by. But you would think that if all the evidence of all comets and asteroids and trans-Neptunian objects can all be explained, all the evidence can be explained by being jettisoned from the earth. And the Bible says that the fountains of the great deep burst up on one day and the windows of heaven were open and it rained 40 days, 40 nights, etc. The windows of heaven being open to me is that stuff is going to be jettisoned into space, and there's going to be some of it coming back from space to bury mammoths and stuff. You know, God opened the window so you wouldn't break the glass. And, you know, it's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And so all the evidence supports that, all of it. And so if God also created something that's going to whiz by and say hi, okay, you know, the prediction, I didn't take the prediction that God could have created something that did that. But the evidence now is and now it's behind the sun, so we can't do any more analysis until it comes out from behind the sun. The analysis is totally consistent with the hydroplate theory premise that too, 3I Atlas was jettisoned from the Earth.
Now, if you take the hydroplate theory, all the evidence that we have, if secular scientists would do this, then they would realize, hey, there's probably a gravitational explanation of why this thing is in the orbit that it is. So,
yeah, they don't want to do that though, because they just salivate of finding an interstellar comet and doing all the stuff about life on other star systems, etc.
Well, let's get to that here in a second. So I want to find out from you, Kevin. Do you think there's aliens on that comet, 3A Atlas or 3I Atlas? But before we do that, I did want to quickly, Doug, I got to hit you up on limestone, and I'm going to do that with the interesting fact of the week.
Oh, no.
What theory best explains limestone?
Is that the interesting fact of the week question?
Well, yeah. You know, that could be. Then you can get a nice
I was going to say.
Yeah. Theory. Okay, so here's the interesting fact of the week.
Okay.
Sedimentary rocks like limestone and chalk are largely composed of which element?
Let's see. Limestone and what was the other one?
Chalk.
Okay, as if that would help. I thought chalk was made of chalk. I'm going to say silica. How could you
Now, to be fair, Doug and I have talked about I'm the one who gets to ask the questions, but I'm not that great at geology. Kevin, do you know the answer to this one?
I mean, it's calcium carbonate is what lime.
How could I? Oh, that's embarrassing. See, now I know how to be embarrassed in public. All right, you have to be gracious about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I really want to get back to aliens.
I do too, and just again, quickly, if you want to learn more about limestone, which theory has the best explanation, I highly encourage Brian Nichol has some great YouTube videos on the hydroplate theory and one bit on limestone that's just really interesting. So
okay, now before we go on, is there any silica at all? I'm going to look that up because I just want to make myself feel better. If there's some silica, I won't feel too badly.
Yeah.
All right, now.
Okay, so
wait. 3I Atlas, but I want to get to, and I apologize, Kevin, because we were talking about this before we went on the air. We were talking about the DART mission and what happened with the DART mission, and there's something coming up that's related to the DART mission that's happening right now that that I didn't know about. Can you tell our audience what's happening?
Well, for those that don't know, the DART mission was a dual asteroid redirection test where we sent a space probe to go and smack into the moon called Dimorphos, a moon that was orbiting another asteroid, the mother asteroid that was bigger, called Didymus. And so we were going to smack into it to see if we could alter the orbit as a means of, in the future, if we see an asteroid with Earth's name on it, that we can go bang into it, alter its orbit so that it won't hit Earth. That was the whole multi-million, tens of millions of dollars mission. They thought they were going to be hitting a solid rock. That was the mission started with hitting a solid asteroid. We knew as hydroplate theory advocates that they would be hitting a rock pile because that's where asteroids and comets came from, is a debris field that was jettisoned into Earth and came together and coalesced. And so when the space probe the cameras on the space probe, as it was getting close to hitting into the moon, Dimorphos, it went past Didymus, which is a floating rock pile. And then it hits Dimorphos, the moon, and just sank in and busted it up like a cue ball hitting a racked, ball on a pool table. Yeah. And they did not expect that. They promised us on Earth that there would be no effects of this because all they're doing is hitting this thing way out there. But it launched 28, I think it's 28, I could be wrong on that, but close to 28 big enough boulders that the Hubble telescope was able to pick up, and even Earth base could see that it busted it up and sent these things. And they had to do a calculation to find out, it looks like none of them are going to hit Earth, because if they hit Earth, it would be like a nuclear bomb going off, and they promised us that wouldn't happen. But they've done the analysis, and they do think it's going to hit Mars. So, what Elon Musk should do is maybe delay wanting to put people there.
I was just going to say, Elon Musk is going to be real disappointed about that DART mission.
Yeah. So then, and see, here's the thing too, is they only could guess at the mass of Dimorphos because they didn't have a way of, you have to orbit a body to see what the mass is. You have to know the mass of one of the bodies. So they had planned, okay, we're going to go smack it, and then the Europeans are going to put up a space probe that's going to go and see what the effects are. We're going to wait for all the dust to settle, and then we're going to go see what the effects are and find out what the real mass of Dimorphos was. Well, the real mass of Dimorphos was much less than what they planned on, because they considered that the mission would be successful if it altered the moon's orbital period around Didymus, the mother asteroid. If it altered it by, I think it was a little over a minute, not even a minute, actually, not even a minute, seconds, that it would be successful. It was 32 minutes. It altered it 32 minutes. Well, the only way you can alter it that much is if the mass of the moon, Dimorphos, was much less than what you thought, because you know the speed of the craft, you know the mass of the craft, and you're estimating how much energy you're going to impart onto that object. It's a physics equation. So the mass was much less. Which they found on all the other things that they've done, is the mass is so much less than what they thought it was. And there was empty space inside when they did the Temple 1 impact mission. So and this is what I'm saying, is that Europeans are going to go out there with the cameras and other instruments and measuring the mass of the moon. Well, the moon lost a bunch of mass. It ejected it into escape velocity, and now they're all in orbits around the sun, going to smack Mars. So that lost a lot of mass. But it's also going to, I think, it's not all back together yet, because it busted up the racked balls. And now they're going to be in their very complicated orbits of physics, because you have no atmosphere, the reason why the mass that was ejected from the Earth, all these boulders and dust and water and everything was able to come together into an asteroid is because it had an atmosphere of the Earth's atmosphere that was entrained to go up and water. And then the solar wind blew the atmospheres of water molecules and stuff off of these asteroids. And now that's why they can't explain how they came about. The secular astronomers cannot explain how a bunch of rocks and dust can come together in the vacuum of space. And if they just were to consider that it at one time had an atmosphere of water, it would make perfect sense to them. But they can't have an explanation for that. Only hydroplate theory advocates can have an explanation for that. And so without an atmosphere, that debris pile is going to have a hard time slowing down to come back together. It's going to be collisions and stuff that do it. And so it's going to be interesting. My prediction will be that they're going to be amazed that they're going to, if they have the instruments on board to do it, and I haven't researched exactly what instruments, but they're going to find everything spectrometry would be granite, mantle, material, etc., that can be explained by having come from the Earth, and it won't be all back together. They'll be shocked at how much of a rock pile that thing was. That's my guess.
Yeah.
And so the European Space Agency has a scheduled visit to Dimorphos coming up soon.
Yeah, and I think it's next year. And Fred, if you have time to just say when does the European Space Agency going to visit Dimorphos? We'll get an exact date on that.
Okay.
Yes. And so you're making another prediction, another hydroplate theory prediction, which now, despite the fact that Dr. Baumgartner classifies them as worthless and meaningless, we know that the hard currency of real science is predictions. If you have a theory and you are willing to make a prediction, if your prediction is proven true, that lends some credible evidence to your theory. It might not prove the theory, might not prove every element of the theory, but it does provide some credible evidence that's meaningful and worthwhile. So you're predicting that they're going to find that the rock pile has been kind of exploded apart, and there's still some things that, and it's going to take gravity a long time to pull that stuff back together, and we're going to be able to see better what was actually inside the more dense rock pile that was struck.
Yep.
Okay.
And that all the evidence, if they do spectrometry and stuff like that, all the evidence is going to could be supported by the fact this stuff came from Earth.
Yep.
Okay, and
So
you
I looked
mentioned
it up
specifically that there could be granite boulders that could be observed.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay,
and it
because
looks
that's
like
a big deal in this article about that.
Yep.
Oh, where's the granite?
Yep.
Where's the granite? Where's the granite?
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go. So it's Hera mission is scheduled to visit Dimorphos in late 2026, so about a year from now.
Okay.
So Kevin, we'll have you on probably before then, but maybe next year we'll revisit this prediction. So I did want to get back to
Can I a second on this prediction?
Sure.
I would not, again, I am a hydroplate theory advocate. I do have orbital physics in my background. I am not all knowing. And I wouldn't have even done this if Dr. Walt Brown was still alive, because I would have asked him first, because he's the genius in the room. And he might have said, Kevin, you get some stuff right, but you're wrong on that, because, he would have had maybe a different view. I don't think so. I think he would have agreed, but I don't know. I'm just saying, I think that's what they're going to find. It's not going to, I don't want to hit peace. This is now proven. Hydroplate theory is proven to be false, because Kevin made a prediction and it didn't come true.
Yeah.
Well, and so, by the way, Kevin, I appreciate the fact that you are humble enough to be just willing to separate your prediction from Dr. Walt Brown's hydroplate theory. Now that Walt Brown has gone on to his reward, and God is busy correcting Walt's papers right now.
Yep.
And Walt's glad, right, to get any corrections. Right?
Yeah.
So we don't want to necessarily associate your prediction with Walt Brown's hydroplate theory. This is Kevin Lee's prediction. So just since this is time-stamped and you've had the temerity to make this prediction almost a year in advance, We just want to make sure all the facts are out there on the table. And I look forward to finding out what we see. That would be really interesting.
It will be.
Now,
Okay.
Three Eye Atlas. Aliens? Yes?
That was popularized by a Harvard astronomer named Avi Loeb, Loeb.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote a response to this that I never did publish it. Every single item, where did I do with that? Every single item in his write-up makes these bold assertions
Oh.
that are ridiculous. Like it's incoming hyperbolic. The evidence will show. He says it's incoming hyperbolic. It's from some other galaxy far, far away, or Milky Way galaxy. No honest scientist, and this is what I said, I've already said it here. No honest scientist should say that they are certain Atlas, Three Eye Atlas, is interstellar, since they didn't even see it until it was between the orbit of Jupiter and Saturn.
Hello.
How can you know that it didn't get a gravity boost? Any honest scientist would agree with that. The probability of an interstellar object flying so extraordinarily close to Mars, Jupiter, Earth, Venus is virtually zero. Not true if the hydroplate theory explanation for it being an asteroid that was in an elliptical orbit in the ecliptic plane, is going to be coming back into the solar system. And it got a gravity boost to show that it's just flying by. And this guy is saying that this is so obviously some, the Klingons coming to shoot the Earth because we're so full of war and everything else, and so it's coming in, flying by, saying, "Here I'm coming," and then behind the sun, this is what he says. When it's behind the sun, it's going to light off its retro rockets and slow down. And instead of flying by the solar system, it's going to come winging around the sun right at us. And we need to right now be ready for that sucker to come and shoot us when it comes back to the Earth. Wow. And that's what this guy is saying.
That's Avi Loeb, right?
Yeah, that's Avi Loeb. Yep.
He's obviously, I mean, he could have a novel in his future. Talk about a spinner of fables. That's really good stuff. I'm on the edge of my seat. And by the way, just in case he's right, okay, because you never know. We would never want to say we know everything. Just right. In case Avi Loeb is right and we're about to all be slaughtered by aliens, everybody needs to know the gospel of Jesus Christ and ask God to forgive you for your sins so you don't suffer in hell forever. So just on that, but because, by the way, whether Avi Loeb is right or wrong or clinically insane, all of us are going to die, and you don't want to die in your sins. I just want to get that.
That's a very important point that I want to ditto as a pastor. These are all arguments that are, you can believe that asteroids came from the Earth and still go to hell because you haven't gotten your sins taken care of. And so, but what the whole purpose of us doing this, and the reason I've spent so many months, if not years, on this is because a lot of people blow off the Bible as just being the writings of man and all this other stuff. But the Bible is written by God clearly, because the fountains of the great deep burst up and the water was jettisoned and it rained 40 days. All the evidence supports that. The Bible was true when people have been thinking it's crazy, but the evidence is there. And if the evidence of the flood is true, maybe the evidence in the teachings of Jesus is also inspired word of God. And Jesus said, if you don't believe in me, you will die in your sins. Mm-hmm. And that should really affect every audience member here, for whatever reason you're listening to this.
Amen.
Yeah. You're a sinner separated from the Almighty God, the creator of the universe, who sent his apostles and his prophets to tell us the history of man and God. And the problem is God loves man and wants man to come to him by faith. And the history of man is we're deceived, we're fallen, we're rebellious, we hate people telling us what to do, especially God. And if we don't get the cure, which is to repent of that and recognize we should worship our creator, we should say yes to him, especially when he's a good creator and his laws are good, that we have to listen to him and believe and trust in him and say, God, forgive me, a sinner. I've sinned against you. I've sinned against man, which is sinning against you. And I want to stop. I want you to be the Lord of my life. And then you can have everlasting life. And that is a long time.
Amen. Preach it, brother.
So, and Brian, before we close, Brian Lauer has, I believe, really good point too, that, why we talk about this, why we, why we find the hydroplate theory is important. And, there's a lot of other evidences out there and dealing with, trying to reach the lost. But when we're promoting something the hydroplate theory actually helps explain or counter arguments against like the Big Bang and the secular astronomy and all the ideas that they have. It's a counter to that. But we've got some creationists that are fighting this very solid argument that we can use against the world, and they're relying, when they rely on CPT, something where they in order to use that theory, you have to embrace a secular humanist idea about plate tectonics. We're not having to do that. And so that's, part of Real Science Radio. We know we're not right on everything. We know that our papers are going to be graded. We're going to miss some things, obviously, on a lot of things, but we're here to try to promote the truth of what we see with the evidence and the science. And if we're proven wrong, great. This paper was far from that, yet even despite the fact that it claimed to do this, we want to get the truth out there, and we want to be able to reach our fellow unbelieving brothers. I know we all have friends who are not believers, and this kind of stuff, if we get right, we just focus on the truth and start with the Bible, always with the Bible. It's the best way to go. And Kevin, the work you're doing is incredible. I really appreciate your knowledge on the hydroplate theory. Is this, you're doing a great service, getting the truth out. And I really appreciate you and, Brian Nickel and all the others that are just really digging in on this stuff and helping us on the show also. And I would like to, one last thing before we started, when we were we were talking about the show before we started today, you mentioned about how you would tell Walt, this proves the hydroplate theory. Well, what was Walt's attitude with that? I loved what you had said about Dr. Walt.
Yeah, he would remind me, Kevin, proof is shouldn't be used in the scientific world. I could be wrong. He would say, I could be wrong. Time will tell. And the reason I would say, well, the time's over. I mean, how many times does the apple have to fall from the tree and be measured at 32 feet per second? How many times do you have to do that before you say gravity has the acceleration in our terms, 32 feet per second squared? I mean, how many times do you have to do that? And Isaac Newton could have said, well, I could be wrong. Maybe next year it'll be 31 feet per second squared. We don't know. So, and he would say that all the time. He wasn't like Dr. Baumgartner accuses him of being a fraud and just holding up this thing, and he's trying to make himself somebody special. I knew the man, and I knew he was humble. I knew he was given great wisdom in coming up with the flood of Noah. I think it's overwhelming evidence to me that he was right.
Yep.
And call me biased, because I am. I'm biased to evidence. If the evidence supports it, then maybe the premise is true.
Yeah.
Yep. And Dr. Walt Brown, I've met him. He's a very, he's a guy of high character and integrity. And he's got secular peer-reviewed articles that support the hydroplate theory on TNO objects coming from our solar system. So we do have peer-reviewed articles that actually support the hydroplate theory. And again, he's also humble. He's like, hey, there's certain things that we're wrong on, but look at this. That he has really powerful evidence that shows that where the TNOs came from.
And let me say one thing about this peer review. You just brought up something I wanted to say earlier. And by the way, Rob Brown wasn't just peer-reviewed. He was peer-reviewed by the Royal Astronomical Society, which is, it's just barely more prestigious than Creation Research Society Quarterly. And just to be clear, that's in total jest. Extremely prestigious. They would never have allowed this article that was put up by Creation Research Society Quarterly to go out as a peer-reviewed article, which is what Tim Clary said, because we said, we the board, through Jim McDowell, said, would you allow us to print in your next quarter the rebuttal to this article. And he goes, yes, as long as it's peer reviewed by the same process that this article was peer reviewed. So, by who's going to be the peer reviewer? Isaacs or the A in Isaacs? That is going to peer review and how do you need a peer review when you simply say your premise is completely fraudulent? It is not true that Dr. Brown's hydroplate theory says that the mantle is made out of basalt. Doesn't say that.
Yeah,
and
that
your
doesn't
whole
require...
hit piece is based on that.
Yeah.
You don't need to peer review that. You just need to apologize for publishing a extremely deficient, technically, professionally article.
Yeah, and just it's the whole core of the article. It builds its conclusion by assuming the things that it wants to prove, and so it's a circular argument, and it's not experimental science.
Yes, and before we close, I just want to let Edward A. Isaacs know that I personally, I'll just speak for myself, I've judged the work as fraudulent, deficient, embarrassing, and there's an open invitation for Edward Isaacs to come on this show at any time. I'm not a scientist. I barely graduated high school. If you want to come on and embarrass me in front of the world, there's an open invitation anytime. You're welcome to Real Science Radio. Everyone who comes on the show, by the way, I have the opportunity to investigate their understanding of the gospel. Haven't done that with Edward Isaacs yet. I'd like to do that and have him do the same for me, because that's what it's really all about as Christian brothers, is to help each other understand and know God better and more, and to walk by faith, not by sight. Anyway, so you're invited on, Edward, anytime. Open invitation. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Kevin. Just fascinating, eye-opening, disturbing, really interesting stuff.
And can I encourage you and Fred to invite Tim Clary, the editor, the one who approved this article and saw that it got peer reviewed before it got published by Creation Resources. I invite him as well. We do know about him. He's currently the director of research at Institute for Creation Research.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah, we
know him.
So we definitely will do that. We'll extend that invitation.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. So thank you guys. Kevin, again, appreciate all the efforts you're doing. So for Pastor Kevin Lea and my co-host Doug McBurney, I'm Fred Williams of Real Science Radio. May God bless you.